Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Code of Ethics webinar, and it's a special happy Halloween day today. So hope you're all ready for the little ghosts and goblins that will come by tonight for some sweet treats from you. Enjoy that. It's excellent that we have a bigger group that's come to join us today. Right now there's 22 people who have joined us, and so we're glad. I invite you to engage in questions and dialogue today. We want to hear from you, so please feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts and opinions with us as we go through the presentation. And we'll certainly open it up at the end if there's any specific questions or thoughts. I have Tony Belcourt with me, I have Terry Belcourt with me, and Tony, our IT expert here, who's joined me to help me through this today, so we can manage as many questions as you throw at us. So the objectives, I'm changing slides, and I just need to.
Just while you're doing that, Jane, I just wanted to recognize that people can absolutely join in the conversation through the chat box and through the Q&A. And they can put their questions in there. You can put them anonymously if you like in the Q&A box. That's the way that you'll be able to interact with us. And also just wanted to recognize that we are presenting from Treaty 4 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. So, and we're recording this so that if you've got friends that you want to share this with later, you can share that link with them.
Excellent. And just to build on what Terry said, maybe there'll be a group of students who want to get together and watch this Code of Ethics presentation too. So the objectives that this presentation will cover today, we're going to just acknowledge the history of the CNA Code of Ethics, the components of regulatory mandate of the SRNA. We're going to talk a little bit about connecting the Code of Ethics to standards and competencies. We're going to review the highlights on the changes, some of those highlights and changes in the 2017 Code of Ethics edition. We're going to actually talk about nursing values, ethical responsibilities, and the ethical endeavors related to broader societal issues. And then we're going to wrap up near the end looking at what the Code of Ethics updates mean for your nursing practice. So I just would like to draw your attention before we move on that this new edition includes the history of the Code of Ethics. So if you open up or go to the inside the first page, there is a documented history of the Code of Ethics. And this really resonates with me. It demonstrates and speaks to the depth of the Code of Ethics and how significant and important that this code is for registered nursing and how far back that goes is something to be acknowledged. So I wanted to acknowledge that at the opening of this presentation. The Code of Ethics is revised periodically, and that's to ensure that it's in tune to the needs of nurses by reflecting changes in societal values and the conditions that are out there in our clinical practice environments that directly affect the public, nurses, and other healthcare providers, and also have significant influence on the healthcare system. We know that societal context in which nurses work is constantly changing. All we have to do is stop and look around each one of our clinical environments, or just even society in general. And all of those things do have a significant influence on nurses' practice. So now, we just wanted to remind you today that registered nursing is profession-led, and that is a privilege. It's a privilege that can be taken away, and RNs have a responsibility to merit that privilege. So RNs are accountable to the public and to the profession, and that's further outlined and stated in the legislation, so in the Act, in the bylaws, standards, the Code of Ethics, and other SRNA resources and Canadian Nurse Resources. It's further stated in employer policies, and it's also about individually where we take accountability for our own practice. And an example of that is the Continuing Competence Program. So this slide here really simply highlights some of the specific components of the regulatory mandate of the SRNA. And just to remind everyone that the SRNA regulates the profession through accountable, effective, transparent, profession-led regulation in the public interest. So how does the Code of Ethics relate to the current RN standards and competencies? In Standard 3, it talks about ethical practice, and it talks about how the registered nurse demonstrates competence in professional judgment and practice decisions by applying the principles in the current CNA Code of Ethics for registered nurses. And if we look to the foundation competencies, under Competency 62, it talks about how practices in accordance with the current CNA Code of Ethics for registered nurses and the accompanying responsibility statements. So that further highlights for you where you can actually go within the standards and competencies to further identify the reason as to why we adhere to this Code of Ethics. So this picture on the right, which most of you, if not all of you, have already seen before, that's what the outside cover of the 2017 edition Code of Ethics looks like. And if you remember back, it's distinctly different from the orange-yellow cover that was on the 2008 edition. So it's easily identifiable when you go to grab your Code of Ethics. So the Code of Ethics serves as our professional commitment to society and to each other. That's really important for us to pay attention to. I think sometimes when we think of the Code of Ethics, it gives us direction in how we proceed with our clients, our patients, communities. But we must also remember that it also is our commitment to each other as nurses. The Code of Ethics is a statement that's accepted by all members, regardless of the domain that you work in, regardless of the context that you find yourself in. We can refer to the Code of Ethics. It sets forth expectations of personal conduct. So personal conduct in relation to nursing colleague to colleague and all other care providers. And as interdisciplinary teams become further enhanced in all that we do, this serves as guiding principles with respect to our personal conduct and our relationships with all other care providers. The Code of Ethics is guidance for decision-making. It gives us direction with advocacy for clients and within our profession. It informs others about RN ethical commitments. So I felt it was important here to just highlight and emphasize the importance of transparency in registered nursing practice. And if we ever have questions from the communities with whom we work, our colleagues on teams, or with our patients and clients or the public, we can refer them to this Code of Ethics and they can read it through. It's open for everyone to refer to. The Code of Ethics upholds self-regulation, talks about moral agents and moral communities. It's a basis for feedback and peer review in our continuing competence program. So the Code of Ethics is meant to be an inspirational resource that's designed to inform about ethical values and the responsibilities of nurses. It's essentially providing guidance for ethical relationships, behaviors, and decision-making. It's meant to be used in conjunction with professional resources, such as the standards, best practice guidelines, research, laws, and regulations that guide nursing practice. But in addition, and important to know that the Code of Ethics is also a regulatory tool. So again, as nursing in Saskatchewan is a self-regulating profession, nurses are bound to a Code of Ethics as a part of their regulatory processes in serving to protect the public. So the 2017 highlights include the following. They've included new content that addresses medical assistance in dying, and I'm sure all of you would agree that this is very timely and that there's many nurses that are looking for some guidance in this area, so we're very grateful that they've included that in this edition. There's new content on advocating for quality work environments, and those environments are critical to support the delivery of safe, compassionate, competent, and ethical care. There's new content addressing TRC calls to action, And for the Saskatchewan Registered Nurses Association, that's really important to us as we are really moving forward to support that call to action as well, as I'm sure all of you are. The 2017 highlights also include updated terminology around creating more common language for nursing ethics, which might bring some more consistency to what we're talking about when we talk about ethics, and not just among nurses, but among our colleagues on interdisciplinary teams. The highlights also update ethical models, and the goal is to promote reflection. And they've also updated the references at the end. So if you're wanting more information about a specific area, you can look at the end of the Code of Ethics for the updated list of references to refer to.
Did we want to check in with our audience, Jane, and just see how many of them have taken a look at the code?
We sure do.
Okay, let's do that. So you'll see a polling question pop up. Please just take a minute. You can vote yes or no to having reviewed the 2017 CNA Code of Ethics. There's no right or wrong answer. We know that this isn't coming into effect today anyway, so you've still got lots of time until it does come into effect. So we're up to about half of our participants having voted. We do have 4 people that have joined us just by phone, so we'll make sure that we're not waiting for them to answer. It'll be a little trickier for them. So just maybe 5 more seconds and we'll close down the polling.
Welcome to the new participants who have joined in since we started. We're grateful that you attended.
Okay, so what we're seeing is that just over half have not yet reviewed the 2017 Code of Ethics. So this information will be really helpful for you. And to those that have, great work. And this will be a review for you.
Absolutely. And hopefully this presentation piques your interest and gives you that additional motivation to pick up the new Code of Ethics and give it a read. So nursing values and ethical responsibilities, that is referred to in Section A. So if you're actually following along in the Code of Ethics, it's on page 8 and 9, where it refers to the nursing values and ethical responsibilities. So just to highlight some of the new sections that have been added and some clarity, under Section A, it talks about providing safe, compassionate, competent, and ethical care. And A4 talks about reporting conditions that interfere with the ability to provide safe, compassionate, competent, and ethical care. The word report has been added. So it's encouraging us to actually bring that to the attention of leaders or whoever that might be in your clinical setting, that you're questioning whether the conditions are interfering with the ability for you to provide safe, compassionate, competent, ethical care. If we look to A5, that actually is very interesting to me. It actually states right in A5, in this edition, that nurses are honest. That's something new that was added in. So that might refer to if you have made a mistake. The Code of Ethics actually specifically talks about being honest, so that would apply to that example. Under A6, new to this edition, it talks about nurses working within their competence and seeking direction when necessary. So further highlighting the importance of us reflecting on our practice, assessing our practice, and speaking up about our competence and seeking direction when necessary. And then A9. A9 includes much more descriptive language around a natural or human-made disaster and including a communicable disease outbreak. So it talks about nurses providing care using appropriate safety precautions in accordance with legislation, regulations, and guidelines. So that brings much more clarity there for me, as I'm sure it will for you. We can move to item A11, which is on page 9 of the new code, where it talks about the responsibility to the patient when conducting research. So that's new, and as we encourage nurses to take a lead in research and to participate and to be a part of research when you can. This is really important to our profession as well. A12 is new, and it talks about the responsibility of fostering a safe, quality practice environment. And if I can remind you, back at the beginning of this presentation, we talked about the societal context in which nurses work and how that's constantly changing and how that does affect the environment. So I think it would be fair to say that there has been quite a significant amount of change in our society, and we recognize that here, that it's affecting the practice environments. And now if we go to A14, which is found on page 10, it talks about resolving team conflict in a constructive and collaborative way. So having that mindset at the beginning of going into working on teams around collaboration and the commitment to resolving conflict. We know that conflict comes up. We as nurses need to be constructive and collaborative in our approach to working with teams and resolving that conflict. A15 talks about supporting each other. For me, this is really important that we have this in there. If we don't have each other and if we don't support one another, it doesn't do a service to our patients, to the outcomes that we're looking for with working and caring for patients. But it also doesn't support collegial relationships. It's so, so important that we support one another. Now, if we look to section B, where it talks about nursing values and the ethical responsibilities continued around promoting health and well-being. So under B2, new to this edition is around exploring a range of choices and recognizing the social determinants of health. So that is also important when we're talking about looking at all the choices of care that are available to our patients, and also being aware of the fact that some patients may have limited choices because of their social, economic, geographical, or other factors that potentially lead to inequities. So nurses need to recognize the social determinants of health. First of all, even know what those are. If it's been a long time since you've gone to school, maybe you haven't, you could use a refresher on what the social determinants of health are. So making acknowledgement of that in this edition has been included. Under B5, new to this edition is to report when the nurse's integrity is compromised by professional practice or patterns of institutional behavior that erode the ethical environment. Moving on to section C, around promoting and respecting informed decision-making. Under this section, C6, it talks about providing care in a non-judgmental manner. With some of the new research around cultural care and cultural safety and cultural competence, there's increased emphasis on how are we non-judgmental. So I encourage you to reflect after we're done our presentation today. How do you demonstrate that you are a non-judgmental person? Is it through your verbal communication, your nonverbal communication, the way you write? How do you demonstrate that? And under C9, it talks about including incapable persons in decisions at their level. So sometimes that means that we as nurses need to stop and reflect and really assess the situation and assess our patient, our client, and make sure that we are partnering with them in their decisions at their level. How might you do that? Section D is around honoring dignity. And in this section, the wording edits have been included from preserving to honoring. So the feedback that was provided to the Code of Ethics supported this, that moving from using the word preserving to using the word honoring would be important in this section of the 2017 edition. So if you look to D3, D3 has added in the wording without judgment or bias. D4 has added colleague and student and added more direction and guidance around how to intervene. And D6 talks about the expanded application. So D6 says nurses utilize practice standards, best practice guidelines, policies, and research to minimize risk and maximize safety, well-being, and/or dignity for persons receiving care. D8. Under D8, it talks about allowing persons receiving care to live and die with dignity. So they added in those two words, and die with dignity. And as nurses, we are often there in those moments when someone is passing, and it's important that we understand that this is a part of our ethical responsibility, and it's more specifically stated in this edition. Under D9, this is a new addition that it talks about nurses must gain clarity on the person's end of life wishes. So having that difficult conversation or that conversation with our patients, our clients, and possibly their family around what those end of life wishes are. And then ensuring that we document a person's end of life wishes to communicate with all caregivers. So that's more specifically laid out in D10. And as we all know, documenting that ensures that continuity of information and that consistency of honoring dignity is carried through. And we've professionally communicated that in the patient's chart so that everyone is on the same page with those wishes. If we move to D11, it talks about palliative care and cultural and spiritual goals. So that's further clarified in this edition. D12 is new, and it talks about gaining an understanding on medical assistance and dying. I'm sure those of you who are working in situations with medical assistance in dying will want to refer to this because it's some really good clarity, some good information in this edition. D14 talks about fostering a moral community in which ethical values and challenges can be openly discussed. And I know for any of you, those of you who are interested, there is quite a growing body of literature around moral communities that you can refer to and further enhance your knowledge around the research that's being done on moral communities. Moving to section E, which is around maintaining privacy and confidentiality. Section E8 refers to nurses and our commitment to how nurses do not abuse access to private information, that we always obtain consent, and we do not intrude on another person's privacy. And that includes photos, videos, and/or other technology. So I encourage all of you to think about how society has changed and the context within which we nurse has changed as well. And there's a whole other world out there with respect to technology and social media, which leads me into E10, which is a new addition to this code where it talks about the use of social media and nurses safeguarding privacy and confidentiality. Number E11 is also new, and that talks about how nurses safeguard the impact of technology on patient privacy, confidentiality, professional boundaries, and the professional image of individual nurses and organizations. Section F is looking at promoting justice and gives us further guidance. Section F can actually be found on page 15 if you're following along or if you're looking for it in the new edition. And F1 specifically talks about adding gender identity and gender expression, which is an important component of what we must consider when we're promoting justice. Section F2 is new, and that specifically talks about nurses respecting the special history and interests of Indigenous peoples as articulated in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to action. Section F3 has added the word students. So F3 states nurses refrain from judging, labeling, stigmatizing, and humiliating behaviors toward persons receiving care or towards other healthcare providers, students, and each other. It's important that we really understand this component of our ethics, as the environments in which we work are sometimes very busy and very chaotic. And our commitment to this is a big piece of promoting professional nursing practice. Big piece of ethics. F4 talks about reporting behaviors if observed or if reasonable grounds exist to suspect their occurrence. So I'm going to actually read out F4, where it talks about nurses do not engage in any form of lying, punishment, or torture, or any form of unusual treatment or action that is inhumane or degrading. They refuse to be complicit in such behaviors. They intervene and they report such behaviors as if observed or if reasonable grounds exist to suspect their occurrence. F5. F5 is a new addition to this code, and it talks about refraining from workplace bullying. F7 is new to this code, and it advocates for evidence-informed decision-making. F8 further emphasizes the importance of moral communities and talks about nurses being responsible to contribute to positive and healthy practice environments. So you might want to consider, how can you contribute to your practice environment to support it to be a positive working environment and support it to be a healthy and safe practice environment. Moving on to Section G. Section G is about being accountable, and that's on page 16 and 17 in the new edition. G2 talks about the actual name, title, and role. So G2 reads, nurses are honest and practice with integrity in all of their professional interactions. Nurses represent themselves clearly with respect to name, title, and role. And I know this is a question I've been asked in my past career. Do I need to identify my name, my title, and my role? And here it's further explicit in our new 2017 code and actually states it clearly. If we move on to G4, G4 talks about how nurses are accountable for their practice and work together as a part of teams. So when the acuity, complexity, and variability of a person's health condition changes or increases, nurses assist each other. We work together. Moving on to G7. G7 further clarifies if nursing care is requested when there is a conflict with the nurse's moral beliefs and values. So they added in and have further clarified a statement that says, but nothing in the criminal code compels an individual to provide or assist in providing medical assistance in dying. So it further clarifies more about MAID and the responsibilities and the ethics around being a part of or assisting in MAID. G10 says nurses advocate for more comprehensive and equitable mental health care services across age groups, so socio-cultural backgrounds and geographical regions and locations. So again, further supporting nurses in their advocacy role around equitable mental health care. And there's been many initiatives that have come out over the last 12 to 16 months around equality with respect to mental health services and mental health care, not only here in Saskatchewan, but throughout Canada. So that kind of goes through and summarizes the more specific highlights and changes in the Code of Ethics. Now, you might be asking, what does this mean for my practice? What does this mean for me in the clinical setting? So some of the changes are more specific. Those expectations of nurses in a more clear and direct way. It's highlighting the healthy teams, including students on those teams. There's increased emphasis on collaboration, working together with other nurses and other caregivers, so other healthcare professionals, healthcare providers on the interdisciplinary team. Actively reporting or intervening, the end-of-life care, and the importance of partnering with our patients and their families, not only in the living components, but in the end-of-life and the dying aspects as well. Being non-judgmental and inclusive, acting on the TRC calls to action, and the complexities that have come with technology and the importance of using technology and understanding our responsibilities and the implications, and having thought about that beforehand. It also means that there's much more clarity, I think, in this edition of the Code of Ethics. Some of the changes are much more specific. For an example, you will report. So the language being more clear and more definitive. And an example of that is it's easier to assess, did I meet the ethical requirement or did I not meet the ethical requirement? I think it's just got a lot more clarity, and it includes some real big questions that we're, as nursing, having when we look at society and how it's changed in some of the complex issues that we deal with, for example, the opioid crisis. So just to let you know that this Code of Ethics, we're still allowing opportunity for people to learn about it, to better understand it, to read about it, to call in with questions, to ask for clarity and better understanding the new edition of the Code of Ethics. On November 13th, the new Code of Ethics is in effect, and you will be held to those ethical responsibilities that we've discussed today. If you have any questions, or you would like to have a conversation about the Code of Ethics, or you need some more clarity, you just need somebody to discuss something in this new edition with, please reach out to us. You can contact us through these ways that are in front of you right now, by emailing a practice advisor or by calling one of the two numbers. We're there to support your practice. And the nursing advisors at the end of those communication channels are more than happy to have a conversation with you, and we invite dialogue. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. It's now a great time to ask questions or share any thoughts or comments with us.
Thanks so much, Jean. Such great information. I think for me, when I was looking through it, number one, I added this to my continuing competence for the year to make sure that I took the time to really take a look at it and know what was different between it. So thank you for boiling that all down for us in this presentation. That's wonderful. I really do think that it is a lot more explicit, and the responsibility that we have for participating in and leading healthy teams is just, it's so clear now in this Code of Ethics. So I look forward to that and what that might mean for practice over the next however many years. So thank you for sharing it. We do have one question. So I understand that CNA has updated the online learning modules and are still available. And that is a really good point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. As an excellent resource for any registered nurse. You can go and do them for free on the CNA website. So take a look on their site for those links, and it just, yeah, go ahead.
We checked yesterday, and they're up and they're there, and they look very interesting. It is certainly my plan to work through those as well.
There's a question again, where can I get more information related to the TRC? Great question.
Great question.
Yeah. If you just Google TRC, there's actually a website that goes through and it shows how Canada is moving towards like taking action on those calls to action, different initiatives that are being there. The health ones are very specific around, making sure that we're offering culturally appropriate options for First Nations people while they're in facility, those kinds of things. So I would go to TRC. I think it's just trc.ca, but if you just Google TRC, yes, it is on our strategic plan as well. So that is part of it. But as far as resources go, the trc.ca, I believe, is the website. How do I get the CNA modules for free to learn more about the Code of Ethics? So that is, you'll put in there that you're a member of the SRNA.
And because you're a member of the SRNA, you're a member of the Canadian Nurse Association. So that's what entitles you to be able to have access to those modules. So if you log into the CNA website, it'll give you some instructions. If it's still not clear for you, please touch base with a practice advisor here and we will provide some more direction.
So we just had a comment that somebody is new from out of province and that this information is really helpful. So thank you very much for that feedback. Another question. G7 protects an individual nurse from having to participate in MAID, but obviously we're not to be judgmental and provide information that we have to support the patient. Absolutely. So it's always been, we can't abandon our patients. We have to make sure that the care is provided and that we provide care to them until someone else can take over that care. So that really hasn't changed. That information in G7 is just to be really clear that there is nothing in law that says you have to participate in the actual provision of MAID. So great point. Is SRNA providing hard copies across the province? No, we are not. They are available free for download on the CNA website, and it will be on our website as well. Or you can order them from CNA if you'd like a nice, shiny hard copy.
Or if you use an electronic medical device to support your nursing practice with an evidence-based practice, point of care technology, you can download the Code of Ethics onto your device so that it's available to you electronically right on the unit.
Awesome. So another question we have is, will this ethical guideline provide an opportunity for nurses to say no if they find a given directive contradicts their ethical or moral standard? So absolutely, the standards and foundation competencies and our Code of Ethics are there for you to use to support, so not only to set the expectation of your practice, but for you to use as a support for your practice if you're in a situation where you don't feel that that you can meet those standards. Jean?
I think that sums it up very well.
Sorry, I'm just jumping in here.
That's good. No, we're doing it together. It's we're supposed to, according to the Code of Ethics.
Will the SRNA be doing any other webinars or activities around the new Code of Ethics?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is a very good question. So there will be, of course, we incorporate all of our new knowledge. Probably nothing specifically about this. We will have conversations in our online community of practice. Those will be ongoing. If you haven't already got in there, we would really recommend that you do. With the new Code of Ethics coming out, we will welcome conversations around the differences. We'll probably start some conversations in there ourselves. So I would say that that's going to be your best bet for engaging in conversation around the Code of Ethics. Certainly, if a specific area, nursing unit would like a presentation more specific to them, they can contact the practice team and we could look into
Workplace
that.
educators. Yeah. Absolutely. I used to do that and it was a lot of fun going out to rural communities. And I know the feedback from offering those workplace educator sessions on things like the Code of Ethics or documentation standards, we had a lot of positive feedback, and it was a great opportunity to engage with nurses throughout the province who we might not have an opportunity to engage with. Just to build on what Terry said, if you have any neat ideas or any suggestions, please don't hesitate to make those. You can send me an email directly, or you can send an email to practiceadvice@srna.org if you have any suggestions around how we could be engaging more closely with our members around this new Code of Ethics.
So again, just another question about planned road trips. We don't have any planned, but we would be happy to set up either a video conference or an in-person meeting, pending schedules and all those good things. But certainly if that would be valuable to your group, then just feel free to contact us and we'll work something out with you.
And then in addition to that, Terry, this webinar remains on our website and people can log in and look at it at any time.
Absolutely. So what if there is a threat to our safety, but refusing care impacts patients' health? What to do in that situation ethically? So that's a really good question, and it seems like we would probably need a little bit more information about that specific topic, that specific question. Certainly looking at different ways of addressing those situations through the different routes that you have, ahead of time, being proactive when you're seeing things like that starting to come about is really important. But I would be happy to speak with you a little bit further about a specific situation if that's what you're looking for an answer to. Let's see. Will it be posted to the website or the community of practice? So I think that question is related to the video link, and that will be posted in both areas. So you'll be able to find it on the SRNA website as well as in our community of practice. And that usually happens within about 24 hours. So
I suspect there might be some great conversations in the online community of practice around the new edition.
Absolutely. I think that clears all the questions that we've got right now. So that was wonderful. Really great questions.
I really want to thank all of the participants. This means so much to me that you attended the presentation today, and that many people took time out of their day to use this as a learning opportunity.
Please make sure you're using this on your continuing competence if you're using this as a, have a goal to really learn and understand the new Code of Ethics. So, thank you. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Happy Halloween to everyone. Enjoy your day. Eat lots of candy. CBC said this morning, I think it's the one day you can eat lots of candy.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.